Well, thank you all for being here and being here so early in the morning. Since we have a little bit of extra time, I'll maybe take it and then we can have more questions as well, which would be great. So I want to talk about estimating human motion in world coordinates. I think this is the fundamental challenge in the field at the moment, and one that people are getting interested in, which is good. To make it clear, our goal is to take video in and have 3D humans out. Notice the cameras moving here. People are moving on the ground plane. They're positioned in depth relative to each other. We have multiple people in the scene. They're interacting. We also want to be able to capture their hand movements, their interactions. So that was just a little teaser. I want 2018. I use this as an example of sort of the canonical approach. We've got some cropped image patch. It gets encoded in some way by a backbone. We get some image features, and then there's an MLP that regresses or projects those features into some parameters. In our case, the parameters of the simple model, the pose theta, and the shape beta, as well as some camera parameters, in this case, rotation, translation, and scale. And so that's kind of the canonical model. And the output is some 3D representation like the simple body model. I want to focus on all the issues with that formulation. The first is that it typically focuses on a single image. And we're really, by doing so, we ignore all kinds of temporal information. It focuses on cropped images. So we ignore all the scene context information that's present. It focuses on unrealistic cameras, typically weak perspective or scaled orthographic cameras. And it estimates the human pose and shape, not in a global coordinate system, but in some local coordinate system. So these are the fundamental problems, but there's one more, which is how do we get training data for this so that we can actually estimate everything? So I'll come back to each of these problems throughout the talk, including one more, but let me start with the problem of how do we get training data for this? And so in my thinking about this has been for many years that if I owned a Hollywood studio, I would be able to get a tremendous amount of really high quality training data. Photorealistic images of people with absolute ground truth of their 3D motion and their 3D shape and all of the details. And as you can see from Will Smith here, it's photorealistic and the 3D is all there. The problem is this costs, $10 million for a few seconds of film, and I don't have that. Max Planck is a great place to work with lots of resources, but not those many. So we built the Bedlam data set, which you may be familiar with. The idea was to ask this question, could we get by with today's graphics techniques that we can all afford to use to create synthetic data with perfect ground truth that would be sufficiently real for training methods like HMR, such that you might not need any real data at all. And so we published this at CVPR a couple of years ago, and it quickly became a well-used data set because of the quality of the ground truth being perfect. This isn't our work. This is the Simpler X paper, and they rated all of the data sets in the field in 2023. And Bedlam was the most accurate among all the data sets you could train on. So I think this is why it's become so widely used. But it's not perfect, particularly for this problem we're talking about today, excuse me, in terms of estimating human pose in world coordinates. It wasn't a perfect data set. And in fact, it has a limited number of 3D scenes and 3D environments, so it's not really a rich 3D structure of the world. It has limited focal lengths, and it also had a fairly limited range of camera motions. In many cases, the camera was static. There were a bunch of other problems with it as well. Body shape variation was very limited. There weren't enough extreme motions. There were no shoes on anybody, limited hair, and we weren't allowed to distribute the hair. With Bedlam, we distribute everything we can so other people can use it. And the clothing wasn't so good. For anybody who was overweight or obese, they didn't get real clothing. They just got a texture map on the body. So all of these things are problematic. And so we've been working on something called Bedlam 2.0, which addresses all of these problems. Again, it's a synthetic data set, but now with a much richer number of real scenes in which we put the people, much richer camera motions. It's basically, we took everything in the original Bedlam and we made it better in lots of ways. So I'll just walk you through some of those things that we did to improve it and why it might be useful for you if you're interested in estimating humans in world coordinates. So we're not the first to try and extend Bedlam and other data sets. So these three methods, so SynBody actually doesn't have camera motions, but it has multiple camera views and then a static camera, unfortunately. PACE introduced a moving camera, but it was a very limited number of sequences. It's not enough to train methods on. And then EgoGen actually did something like this. It took Bedlam or a mass motions and stuck an artificial camera on an agent to create egocentric views. Quack introduced multiple people interacting with some camera motions, but it was the interactions are nice, but it's not a very realistic data set. And HumanVid used Bedlam to generate camera motions as well. They're not super realistic camera motions, and the data is not, it's single person, and it's not exactly what we need. So for Bedlam 2.0, we introduced realistic camera motions, classic things like dolly shots, combining that with changing focal length. This is a challenge for every single method today, the varying focal length combined with camera motion. We add Perlin noise to introduce camera shake. We have a wide variety of different camera motions. We do still use HDRI images, but in cases where we have HDRI images, we don't have the 3D scene structure, so we just use panning shots in those cases. We have realistic scenes with realistic lighting, lots of different scenes, and have people moving around in them. To get realistic camera motions, we give people handheld devices, phones and tablets, and then they move around viewing a virtual agent, and we capture those camera motions, and then we can replay them in a wide variety of scenes. We also use an Apple Vision Pro to get egocentric motions. So we get lots of people walking around with the Vision Pro on, and we capture a wide range of cameras looking at people behaving. And then we can generate artificial data from egocentric viewpoints. So this is we really focused on getting a wide variety of challenging 3D camera motions with realistic behavior. And the sequences are long enough to be interesting for this challenge of estimating people in world coordinates. To give you an idea of how much more varied Bedlam 2 is than Bedlam 1, the red histogram is the focal length distribution in Bedlam, and Bedlam 2 has a much wider range of focal lengths. And focal lengths, of course, are going to be correlated with the distance of the camera from the person, and that's going to influence foreshortening as well. Again, looking at body shapes, I know most people here are probably interested in 3D motion in the world, but I think body shape's important to figure that out. We had a very limited number of body shapes in the original Bedlam, the red histogram. We used a much wider range. There was this odd gap, I don't know why, in sort of the range where most people are from like 25 to 28 BMI. We had an odd gap. And then we resampled this on the right to give us really a very diverse range of 3D body shapes that are in Bedlam 2. Then we take simple X bodies, 16 shape components. Very important, we have a locked head, so the back of the head has no hair bun. We add hair, we add shoes, we add texture. We take emotions from a mass, Moyo, and beat 2. We then have this wide range of body shapes. Now, if you take a wide range of body shapes and you use a mass motions, you need to retarget that or you're going to get foot sliding. So we use retargeting with the Unreal inverse kinematics method, and the green results here are the retargeted ones to smaller and larger bodies. This is really important if you want good foot-ground contact, and if you want to estimate people in world coordinates, you need to have good foot-ground contact. And so this also means that while we sample about 5,000 mass motions, there are actually many more motions because this inverse kinematics process changes them. So there's a wide diversity of motions. Amass is pretty good at that, but it's not good enough. Moyo adds yoga poses, adding a real extreme poses, which actually helps a lot. We then do a whole lot of hand pose augmentation using different techniques to get hand poses. And we were really frustrated when we made Bedlam. We didn't have good hair. So we actually hired the same people that Microsoft used for their projects to make us 40 unique hairstyles, all high quality strand-based artist designed hair grooms. And we make these available for research purposes. There's another thing missing, which is that humans all wear shoes most of the time. So we used this Google shape data set and got a whole bunch of shoes. We removed high heels because they're a problem. We made a version of Simple with stocking feet. And then we took all the shoes and aligned them to the Simple mesh. We transferred the UV maps, displacements, and textures. And then we added the shoe thickness. So this is really important again for foot ground contact so that people are not floating above the ground plane. That you actually, if people are wearing shoes, you have a good idea of where they are with respect to the ground plane. There's no point reasoning about the ground plane and human contact with it if your model of the person is barefoot and all the people you're looking at have shoes on. You're going to have a 1 to 2 centimeter error there that's going to cause problems. We also hired a clothing designer to grade garments into sizes from extra small to 6XL. This allows us to dress everybody in the data set in realistic clothing, including the overweight and obese subjects. And then, of course, we can change body shape and pose and run physics simulation on the clothing, and we get realistic clothing. All right, so that's Bedlam 2 in a nutshell. Does it work? So it does, and we're still evaluating it. The take-home message is that Bedlam 2 is much more complex than Bedlam 1. I'm showing you results on various metrics of estimating human motion in world coordinates. I just referenced methods like Slammer and Wham, which were state-of-the-art a couple of years ago, or even a year ago, and are trained on a variety of data. The methods that you see here are the GVHMR and PHMR. So PHMR is prompt HMR, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. It's a CVPR paper this year, are significantly more accurate when trained only on synthetic data. When trained on Bedlam alone, they do pretty well. But when you train them on a combination of, well, they do better if you train them on Bedlam 2 or B2. And if you use both B1 and B2, they do even better. I think we're going to be at a point where we don't need B1 anymore, but there's a bunch of technical things still before we finalize this. I hope it's not me that's dropping out. I think I'm okay here. And then, of course, this is not these results here in terms of error in world coordinate system, root translation error, RTE, jitter, foot sliding, all of these metrics, I think will get even better when we add some real data. And I'll talk a little bit about how we get more accurate real data to add. So all of this is coming soon. There's about 8 million images with realistic motion blur, 74.5 hours of video. It's a 26 terabytes. It's not ready for you to download just yet because we are just setting up the file server, but it'll be available soon. And the key thing for this community is, good foot ground contact with shoes, high quality motions, lots of longer sequences, some very long sequences, wide variety of focal lengths, and realistic camera motions, including complex things like changing zoom during the camera motions. Okay, so this is great. I just gave you an advertisement for Bedlam 2, and I'm only 4 minutes into my talk because we started early. So I have time to tell you about the next piece of work. So one of the key issues, I presented this HMR model, and there's several things. We need accurate ground truth. We need a good estimate of the camera, and we need a good model, backbone and regression method. And so I want to tell you a little bit about camera HMR, which just appeared at 3DV in the spring. This is work with Priyanka Patel. And one of the key issues that we see in existing methods is problems with foreshortening. So most methods assume a fixed focal length or a weak perspective projection model. Typically, they assume a long focal length. And if you have the wrong camera model, then you're never going to get things right. And so here's a example of a foreshortened case where the woman is standing upright with the cameras way above. And this is a result of HMR 2.0. The only way for HMR 2.0 to make sense of this world, because it looks like her legs are really short because of foreshortening, is to squish them up into a little ball. So this can be quite severe, particularly when we have wide-angle lenses. And when you have a wide-angle lens, you tend to be very close to the person. When you're close to the person, this perspective effect is very severe. With a long lens, far away, it's not a big deal. So our idea was, can we treat humans effectively as a calibration object? So human body shapes and poses are highly regular. They vary, but our size is constrained, our poses are constrained. And those perspective distortions that we see are common across people. And this distance of the person to the camera to the person and the focal length are correlated. So with all of this information, what if we had a training set that would let us learn this sort of human as a approximate calibration object? To do that, we captured around 500,000 images from Flickr that had EXIF information. We were careful about how we collected this to make sure we had people and good EXIF information. Images hadn't been edited and so on. And then we trained a regressor to go from a single image to the focal length, or in this case, field of view of the camera, but we can always convert back knowing the sensor size to the focal length. This we're going to use to get much more accurate pseudo ground truth. So what we did is we took the 4D humans data set, and for every image in that data set, we estimated the focal length of the camera. And then we modified the method simplify, which is a method that fits simple to 2D key points. And it was used to create the 4D humans data set pseudo ground truth. But now we modify simplify to take the estimated camera focal length into account. And that helps. But 4D humans also only uses sparse key points for fitting simple, and so it can't capture realistic body shape. You'll notice this if you use 4D humans or methods trained on it. So what we did is we took the Bedlam data set, for which we have lots of ground truths, and we defined dense key points all over the body. Remember, most people are clothed in that data set, so we learned to estimate these dense key points under clothing. So 128 surface markers, and we train a method to predict these. And then we modify, simplify. Again, now it just takes the focal length of the camera, and it can take these estimates of dense key points in fitting. So here's the method. Given us a single image, we use the whole image to estimate the focal length using human FOV. Then we crop out an individual we want to work with. We compute their dense key points as well as the regular body joints. And we take the focal lengths, the dense key points, and the joints, and we use cam simplify, which is what we call it, to estimate the body shape of the person. Okay. We also take that crop and the estimated focal length together with the bounding box, and we give it to what we call camera HMR, which uses a VIT backbone and combines these the focal length, the bounding box, and the estimated image tokens, and estimates the 3D pose and shape of the person. But then we go a little bit further, which is we do something that's like spin, and we iterate this process. We use the estimated body from a trained camera HMR to initialize cam simplify. This is important to get good initialization. And then using those dense key points, we run that again. And then we take that estimated pseudo ground truth and we use it in our loss to train camera HMR. This process repeats, I think we do it 3 times, and we get much more accurate ground truth. So for the 4D humans data set, you can see here, for example, one bias that in the blue ones are the original 4D humans data set. It has a bias to bent legs. This is because they used a prior the prior in simplify was this not very good human pose prior. But this by using this process, we remove that bias. Second, there are examples here of foreshortening. Consider the first column highlighted here. The woman's arms are facing the camera. So there's significant foreshortening here. And which is because the original Simplify doesn't understand the focal length of the camera, it doesn't project it properly, and you get a bad answer. You get the wrong depth in the world. Because it doesn't understand the focal length, you get the wrong depth, and that's why you get this foreshortening problem. But we get it correct in the new pseudo ground truth. There's several other examples of that where there's foreshortening of this woman's legs on the far right, for example, not sticking out far enough. Very common. So you get an improved, and we also get better body shape. Like this fellow here on the right is a little heavy, and you can see that the 4D humans data set has him with a fairly generic body shape, sort of androgynous body shape, and too slim. So that works pretty well. The camera HMR then trained on this data set. If you look at the top row, HMR 2.0 doesn't deal with the fact that this woman's arm is really very close to the camera, whereas camera HMR does a much better job. And the teaser I showed you before of the woman's legs being all scrunched up is addressed here. So running that as a single frame, it's just a single frame method. The results are pretty robust. We get reasonably good estimates of body shape fully automatically, and it can deal with fairly complex poses. So if you look at this, it's actually state of the art in terms of accuracy among all single frame methods. I think this is still true, and it competes well with everything but well, even the best multi-frame methods at the time we wrote this, like WHAM was about the best. It does really well. But it doesn't estimate people in world coordinates. It does a better job of estimating the depths of people because it is also estimating the focal length, but it doesn't put people truly in world coordinates. So let's look at how to do that. To do that, we're going to address several things in this case. So we're going to really fix this camera model. We're going to deal with the world coordinate system. We're not going to deal with cropped images anymore, and we're going to deal with video sequences. And that's prompt HMR, which is appearing here on the 13th in the very first poster session, so come check that out. So this classic model I've been talking about takes a cropped image, regresses some parameters of the body. It doesn't see the whole scene. It doesn't see the context. It can't reason about how people are interacting with each other in the world. And so what we really want to be able to do is take a scene like this, where there's rich information about what's going on, and estimate everybody in the world coordinate system. That's the goal. And I want to contrast these sort of HMR-like models that look at little crops of the image and just reason about human pose parameters. We call this pixels to parameters. Contrast that with vision foundation models, which understand a lot about the scene and what's going on in it and the context, and they take into account global information. And so what we wanted to know is, can we bring some of that to bear on the human mesh recovery problem? And so prompt HMR does a variety of things. So for example, we train an HMR model that can be prompted with things like bounding boxes, which are very easy to get, or face detections, which are even more reliable and easy to get, or with information about whether people are interacting or not, or semantic or masks, like SAM2 segmentations about where people are interacting, or even text describing things about a person's body shape that can be helpful in solving this problem. So the way it works is we take in the full image so that we get a full image context. We encode that. We then, and if you forget, we also take into account the camera. And this top row there is basically a pretty traditional model like camera HMR, encode the image, except it's the full image in this case. Field of view of the camera, and then some decoder. But what we're going to add is tokens that encode information about these bounding boxes, some text information, whether people are interacting, and then we can also take in masks. And what we're going to estimate then is people in world coordinate system. So I think I have time actually to I'd hidden a bunch of slides, but I gained back time. So the way these box prompts work, we train with a wide variety of box shapes. So you can easily detect boxes in the image, and boxes of different size. We want the same pose to come out no matter what size box I give. And this works pretty well. Does this play? So we're varying the box size here, and the result on the right is, oh, let me see. It's not really playing properly because there it is. I'm varying the box size, and the output on the right is relatively stable. So if you just give it a crop that gets part of the person, like their face or their torso, it'll still do a reliable job. And then we could take in the box prompts like this. However, if two people are closely interacting, the boxes are highly overlapped and you can get poor results. But if you pass in the mask, you can get much, much more precise results. And then with the text prompts, we can say things like, there's a tall, broad-shouldered female, for example, and the baseline model doesn't do a very good job, but by adding these text prompts, you can get more accurate 3D shape estimates. Okay, so let me move on to this. So just for some comparison, here's multi-HMR. It's a dense scene with lots of people, highly overlapped. It doesn't get the linear structure of how people are sitting, and it misses various people. With prompt HMR, it gets all the people and a nice linear structure for how they're arranged in the world coordinates. Multi-HMR here doesn't get the seated poses of people kneeling. It also adds a whole lot of people that don't exist in the foreground, whereas prompt HMR figures this out. We then extend it over time. So we do it a per frame method, then we add a temporal transformer, and then we decode the per frame simple information plus foot ground contact. This is in camera space, and then we use the motion estimation method in tram and convert this into a metric space in world coordinates. This runs at about 3 to 5 frames per second on an H100. It's not real time yet. And we also have an optional phase where we estimating the foot ground contact as we go, and we could do a cleanup where we adjust the poses so that there's good foot ground contact. But this works pretty well. Here's a comparison with world grounded human motion recovery, GVHMR. Notice the bottom two images. GVHMR doesn't understand this motion of the person in the world coordinate system on the skateboard. On the lower one, you see the trajectory of our camera estimate and the person moving in the environment. Things like jumping are also quite hard. This is the former German foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, who is also a trampoliner. And you can see on the right that prompt HMR captures her up and down motion well. These mask prompts turn out to be quite useful. These fighters get very close to each other. On the top row, you see the results with just box prompts, and it's very jittery, particularly when the person is occluded, and it's much better down below when using masks from SAM2. And then, this works quite reliably, estimating people in world coordinates. This, I just want to, if we look around, we see that the people are estimated in the world coordinates quite accurately. Okay. And then in terms of numbers, I want to give you some results. This is in image coordinates or camera coordinates. I mean, this is standard metrics for per joint, mean joint position error, and per vertex error. Among methods that look at the whole image, prompt HMR is more accurate, lower numbers. And among methods that are temporal methods that put people in world coordinates, it's very accurate. So I think it's currently the state of the art in terms of video-based methods, particularly when putting people in world coordinates. It's still not as accurate as camera HMR, which is a per frame method. But when we look at the metrics in terms of world coordinates that we were looking at before, it's significantly more accurate than the recently published methods. So just to give you an idea, this same method is live on the Meshcapade website. It's called Mocapade 3.0. The difference between the CVPR version, the code should be out now, or certainly by the time the main conference starts. The difference between the Prompt HMR and Mocapade 3.0 is the data that's trained on, basically. So the commercial version is trained only on commercial data, whereas Prompt HMR is trained on all the academic data sets. This just give you a teaser of where Mocapade 3.0 is going. This is probably 3.1, which includes facial expressions. And I think we're now getting people in world coordinates with pretty accurate hand and face motion. All right, so what's left? Well, I talked about all these things, but we addressed a whole bunch of these issues. But let's see. The one thing I didn't address is this, that I just assumed simple was the right thing. I didn't question that. But one thing we've been looking at is the fact that simple skeleton was designed for computer graphics, and it's not really the human skeleton. So we created something called the bioamass data set that takes simple body models from the amass data set and puts a 3D skeleton inside. And we do this by putting markers, virtual markers on the amass bodies, and then using a state-of-the-art method to fit a biomechanical skeleton to that marker data, because that's what those methods expect. And then this puts the skeleton inside human. And then we built something called Skell. And you'll see George Pavlakos' group has a paper on estimating Skell from images at this conference, but it has a bunch of properties. It's still like simple. It's a simple model, but it only has 46 degrees of freedom instead of 72. Simple is over-parameterized. Like your joints actually don't move the way the simple joints do. It includes a realistic spine and shoulder, and it has this rigged biomechanical skeleton inside. So you can basically go back and forth between Skell and simple if you like, and you can replace simple in your methods, and you get a lot of benefits. And just to show you that that works, this is something So Young, one of the organizers of this meeting, did, where you can estimate this the Skell parameters directly from video sequences. I think this is a nice step in the direction of where the field should go. If we're trying to get more accurate about estimating people in the world coordinates, we should also get maybe more realistic about the kinds of motions that they have. Okay, so then what's next is now that we have Bedlam 2.0, I think we could do what we should have been doing all along, but didn't have the training data for, and that's end-to-end training of human and camera motion estimation simultaneously. We need still synthetic data for human-human and human object interaction. That's still missing from Bedlam 2.0. We need better body scene contact estimation. I'll talk a bit about that in another workshop tomorrow. About how we estimate contact in the world. I think it's really important. Here we just looked at contact with the ground plane, but we want contact with all the objects in the scene. We need more real data with verifiably accurate pseudo-ground truth. I think we need to move to these biomechanical models with biomechanical priors, and people are starting to build biomechanical priors on top of things like bioamass. We need faster than real-time motion, and we're getting there. And then, you know, if we really want to talk about putting people in the world coordinate system, one of the reasons we want to do that is we want to reason about their interactions with that world. And here we're just recovering simple, and we're not recovering the world or the objects that people are interacting with. And of course, we want to do that as well. And I think we can exploit a lot. Prompt HMR is just a step in the direction of exploiting much more rich information about the scene and what's going on in it. And I actually think from monocular video, we can get to something like Vicon accuracy in many cases, not in all cases. And if you want more information on any of these methods, the Bedlam 2 link is not yet available. But if you go to check with well, just check me on Twitter or X, excuse me. I'll post it when it's ready. So with that, I'll stop and we maybe still have time for some questions.